Hi, my name is Paul Zachariah, and if elected president, I will make soup. Let's make soup. That's a facetious way to start this video. This is my third attempt at making this because storage on my phone and other weird, wonky things that I don't quite understand well enough had to be taken care of. So I could have the storage space on the phone to record this. Point being, or here, let me get started. Joe Rogan did a podcast with Brett Weinstein a couple of days ago, maybe a week ago now. They were talking about how there's like a leadership vacuum. And Joe Rogan was kind of talking about how if there's a guy on YouTube kind of giving his ideas on policy and trying his best to explain himself, he might, I don't know, might agree with that guy. You never know what kind of opinions exist and what kind of things might actually sound like legitimate ideas. So here we go. I'm a guy on the internet trying to give my opinion and explain myself as best as possible. That being said, I want to use this as a sort of learning opportunity. So with the ideas presented here, I would encourage you to ask me a bunch of questions that would point me in the right direction of information. Towards credible information, hopefully. I don't want to see like spam or whatever, but I mean, sure, it happens. I'm not gonna yell at you because you can do what you want. Free country, all that bullshit. But I think in terms of talking about policy, I should like list out these categories I've got for policies, and keep in mind that not every policy is going to fall under only one category. And some of these policies, these categories can fit into each other on some level. I think a lot of the things I want to discuss can fall under either domestic or foreign policy. I think right now, though, I want to focus on domestic relations and such. I do have opinions on foreign things, but I think it's more relevant to talk about what's going on within the country. And thusly, here's my list of types of policy. Foreign policy, domestic, economic, legislation, education, labor, medical, law enforcement, and basic rights. I think these are all hot button issues that people want to be talking about and having a discussion on, putting forth ideas and potential solutions, educating each other along the way. That being said, my focus right now, I've only got talking points for economic policy at this moment in time, and as my thoughts develop, I'm going to try to cover other types of categories in that sense. But when it comes to economic policy, I'm just going to read off these 3 points here and then try to explain them and then summarize. And that's just going to be this video. This is where the conversation starts. I think these are very important things to talk about, regardless of whether or not I'm wrong or right or whatever. We need to discuss it and be open about it. If people don't know, we got to point them in the right direction. We got to encourage them, not shame them for not knowing. We can't shame people for ignorance, because otherwise that perpetuates ignorance in people. That being said, let's get into it. So economic policy, my first talking point here, I'm just going to read it. I think the government needs to be a very active referee in the economic world to ensure that monopolies are broken up, stay broken up, to ensure that the competitive nature of the free capitalist market needs to exist. That may not make a whole ton of sense because it's a jumble of words that I typed up earlier, and I'm trying to paraphrase it because I have a few typos. But basically what I'm trying to say in that is that the government needs to be involved in our economy. How that involvement manifests, I think it needs to take on the role of a referee, wherein the game is dictated by the referee. If the ball flies out of the court, we look to the referee. If there's a questionable play made in the game, we look at the referee. Where's the call? The referee needs to be relatively active within the economic space that is in our country, just due to the fact that if we keep a laissez-faire approach, economic injustices are going to continue to occur, and we need to fight these status quos that exist within our society. I think I got a little sidetracked there. Basically, The government needs to be a referee in order to keep businesses honest and accountable, and protect the consumer, the average citizen, its constituents, more or less. And that is manifested one way by making sure that not everything is owned by one fucking company, or three companies that are all like, oh yeah, we're all going to jack up our prices at the same time. And that'll totally be a legit way to circumvent the free market, the competitive market. I think it's ridiculous that they're still able to exist, and that's kind of going back to some like Theodore Roosevelt vibes, some Franklin Delano Roosevelt vibes, mainly because history has painted them as antitrust, when in actuality they weren't against businesses. They were for the regulation and competitiveness of the market, whether it's for its constituents to participate in, or for each corporate entity to participate in. Everybody deserves a fair shake at it and the opportunity to participate in it. I think getting rid of monopolies spreads out this opportunity to participate, mainly because there's no coordinated price jacks. They're hopefully, with a more active government in terms of refereeing in the economic space, there might be less price gouging. Wouldn't that be nice? And that's like maybe a trickle-down effect of that rule set. But I personally believe that right now we're experiencing late-stage capitalism, wherein a bunch of things are owned by just a couple of people. And in order for us to maintain this free capitalist market and the quote-unquote invisible hand that exists in many economic principles, we need to ensure that rules and regulations are followed by businesses. They can't keep getting away with not... I mean, the gig economy is one thing to evaluate for sure, and that's like one portion of this big problem, which is the economic area of our policies and our culture and our country. Yeah, that's point one. Monopolies need to be broken. I think that'll spread out opportunity a pretty fair amount. How do we keep them broken up? I think that's up to the policies set forth when we break up these monopolies, and whether or not that's a temporary thing that we'll need to reevaluate in a couple of years, because the world will change, our culture will change. America is constantly this melting pot of clashing cultures and mixing cultures, and change happens. We need to be able to change. And so if it's a temporary solution, I'm kind of okay with that, because I do believe that circumstances might be different in a couple of years, 10 years, 5 years. I don't know exactly how long, and I don't have all the answers, but I think that's a step in the right direction. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums up talking point one. Break up monopolies, spread out the opportunity, keep businesses honest and accountable in that sense. My second talking point, I'll just read it real quick. I maintain this active referee advocacy by saying that this would tie in with labor policy to ensure that the job market maintains a competitive nature by weeding biases out of businesses and its hiring processes, as well as ensuring that the lowest earning jobs are substantial enough to provide for themselves and their dependents. One thing that I didn't write in there, when it comes to talking about weeding biases out of businesses, not only in a diversity sense, but also in a opportunity sense, wherein companies are requiring ridiculous amounts of experience for these jobs, wherein there's no job to get that, like all of the jobs that require that experience, there's no one area of that job market that provides the experience initially to participate in that job. And so I feel like there's a lot of bias in businesses when it comes to how long somebody's been in the industry or whatever area of the market they find themselves in. And that's a thing that we need to tackle as a culture or as a nation. It really depends. There's too many variables to really talk about executing, but I think these are ideas that need to be talked about. Ensuring, and the part about ensuring that the lowest earning jobs are substantial enough to provide for themselves and their dependents, That really just means raising the status quo for our lower class, and technically as well as the middle and upper class. But that comes with the idea, it's based off the idea that the circulation of dollars through the economy is what grows the economy. And it's incredibly important to the growth of the economy that money is circulated through it. Putting the money or requiring companies to pay their lowest level employees enough to provide for themselves and their dependents. And if they're smart about their money, maybe they'll be making frivolous purchases as well. And hopefully they do. We want to be putting our lowest earning citizens in that position to spend money, because that will grow the economy. That will expand the economy. I personally believe that. I could very well be wrong, though. If you disagree with what I say here, challenge me on it, number one. Number two, ask me a question about it. Try to get me to explain my ideals more from maybe a different perspective. I want to talk about this more because it's a conversation that needs to happen. And that's really where I'm coming from out of all of this. We need to start talking about it, and I'm open to ideas and suggestions and comments and criticisms. However, we can't shame people for not knowing things, number one, and we have to encourage this culture of asking questions, discovering information, whether that's through school or not. And yeah, I think I got a little sidetracked there as well. But to summarize point two, I'm reading it again to make sure I know what I'm talking about. We need to maintain the idea of a referee government in the economic space in order to ensure that people are finding people have access to these opportunities. We can't be secluding people because they're fresh to the market or new to the market. If somebody got trained for a job at a college, they should be able to get that job when they graduate college. And sure, internships, and all that other garbo could be a potential way to gain experience in the market. But honestly, that's a sham. I personally believe that it's an excuse to pay them less than what they're actually worth. And thusly, another way that companies expand their bottom line for them, for the top earners rather than the entire company. Got sidetracked again, but I think that that covers the weeding bias out of business. The other half of it is ensuring that the lowest earning jobs are substantial enough to provide for themselves and their dependents. The economy, in summarizing that, the economy expands when dollars circulate through it. There's a number of people that don't want to circulate their dollars. And I think one of the best ways to move that money from some of these bigger pockets to some of the smaller pockets is to have a rule set that mandates that the lowest income workers are able to sustain, maintain, and slightly improve their current living standards, wherever they may be. I think that putting the money into the hands of those people, I feel like those people are more likely to spend it. I think those people are 100 times more likely to spend it than somebody who's got $1 trillion in their bank account and just has it, I guess. They have it. What are they going to spend it on? They don't know. Yeah, I think that's one of the best ideas I can put forth in order to kind of redistribute that money through a rule system rather than like just saying, hey, you guys can't have that money. We need to hold these businesses accountable. And by holding them accountable, we effectively change how quickly people are able to stuff money into their pockets, I hope, and hopefully put enough money into the hands of the lower class people to stimulate the economy. I think that's the only way for our economy to expand at an unprecedented rate. I personally think that we're able to do that. I think this is a country where so much growth should be happening, but it's all being stifled. And I think that's point two. I think I'm getting a little off track. I know I wanted to try to summarize that, and I don't think I really succeeded. But I'm going to move on to number 3. My point number 3 here is this also pushes the idea that businesses cannot pass on the taxes they are due to the consumer, and that despite donations and other charity work does not exempt businesses from being charged a tax. The idea that the people are taxed by their government and then by businesses to secure profits, to me, is insane. I think, I'm not sure the exacts of how it's going on, but a lot of companies charge like a tax, right? That tax is paid to the government. And whether or not it's a sales tax, I think the company should be responsible for, or held accountable to dip into whatever profits they made and actually pay that tax rather than passing on the price of the taxes to the consumer. Because right now, even if a company is paying tax, it's being paid by the consumer still. The consumer is paying that company's tax because they're paying the price of it. Like, that's the only way I understand it. And if I'm wrong, point me in the direction of a resource that proves me wrong. I would love to read it and then change my value system based on that. But the conversation starts here. These are my ideas, and I'm not saying everybody's going to agree with them, but that's like how it functions. And more or less my value system on why I think this idea is relevant is because just like a citizen exists within the umbrella of the government, and they pay their fair share to exist within that society, right? That's kind of like the subscription of the citizen to the government service, you know? Companies have to pay that subscription as well, and they should not be allowed to pass on that expense to the consumer. The consumer's already paying their existence fee to the government. The company also, whatever company exists, a conglomerate, an incorporation, whatever you want to classify these things as, they also need to be paying their fair share as well. And not passing on the expense to the customer. Whatever profit margin they have should be dipped into and then pay the taxes. We can't be letting these companies account for how much taxes they're going to accrue. We can't let the companies pass on the taxes that they're going to accrue throughout whatever economic cycle exists to the consumer. I think that's ludicrous, and it's like double dipping on the customer's pocketbook, you know? That's just my personal perspective on it. And I do think that if a company is profitable enough or successful enough to do donations and charity work, great. That's what it is. It's donations and charity work. You're improving the status quo for everyone. That's all it is. We shouldn't be exempting people or corporations from taxes because they've donated a lot of money. I don't think the system should work that way, because then we're unable to pay our national debt. There's no progress made on that. And I'm not saying that, oh yeah, everybody's going to be doing donations and charity work to avoid taxes, because not everybody's able to do that. Not everybody's in this like percentile of income to be able to manifest those things. And thusly, it's not an opportunity accessible to everybody. Thusly, shouldn't really be an opportunity in the first place to become tax exempt for doing some donations and charity work. What do those donations and charity work even go to? I mean, McDonald's collects donations, Walgreens collects donations. There's just so many businesses that ask you at the end of your purchase, oh, would you like to donate to this cause or this or that thing? When in reality, they're getting a tax write-off for money that you're giving them because they're just handing it off to somebody else. I think that's kind of illegitimate. I don't think that should be a thing. Hopefully that kind of summarized. I don't think that really summarized. So I guess I'll look at these again and try to reiterate my points here as a summary. I think the government needs to be a very active referee in order to break up monopolies and ensure that opportunity is not relegated to two companies or two private equity firms or what have you. And these are just vague examples. because I keep getting distracted here. I've got so much to say, and I'm trying to really condense it as much as I possibly can. Government needs to be a very active referee in a number of different facets when it comes to the economic space that our country facilitates. Number one, we need to break up monopolies. Number two, we need to ensure that the competitive nature of the free capitalist market still exists. Otherwise, I believe it unviable or unsatisfactory at the very least. I maintain the advocacy of this referee stance because I think it's very important to keep businesses accountable in order to ensure that opportunity is accessible to everyone, regardless of education level or experience level or the other things that affect our diversity in this nation. As well as ensuring that the lower class people, because you know what, they are doing the lower class job. And that's just kind of the way capitalism works, in that sense that there are going to be people at the top, there are going to be people in the middle, and there's going to be people at the bottom. The way we ensure that opportunity is accessible to everybody and there's that social mobility through the lower, middle, and upper class is by having these rules and regulations to ensure that people have these opportunities. And that ties into making sure that the lowest earning people are making enough money to be able to stimulate the economy on their own. They should be able to vote with their dollar instead of being forced into situations where it's one thing or the other and they're both just as fucking expensive and terrible. Obviously, these are vague examples. And the third thing is that this also means that businesses shouldn't be able to escape their taxes. The national debt is a terrifying thing to look at because we don't really know as far as I'm aware, I don't really know who the country owes all that money to. Who do we owe that money to? Is it to the people, the constituents of the United States? In which case I'm really confused, because how do we owe money to ourselves? Doesn't make sense to me. But also the national debt, in that, like, what if we owe that to someone else? How do we fix that? That's not a good thing to have. That means someone else could have exercised power over our government and say, you know what, you haven't paid this debt yet? We're taking over. That sounds ludicrous to me, and that terrifies me to the nth degree. I'm not saying that's exactly what could happen. I'm not sure what systems are in place to potentially prevent it. Point me in that direction if you've got that information. But yeah, corporations can't really be allowed to escape their taxes to exist within the free market provided by the government and its people. In addition to that, yeah, charity work and donation should be just that. We shouldn't really be exempting people from taxes or businesses from tax collection just because, oh yeah, we built a park in this one area, or oh yeah, we donated such and such amount of money to whatever non-for-profit organization exists out there. And oddly enough, there are for-profit charity organizations, and potentially that's a whole separate thing to look at. The whole non-for-profit charity religious sector of the economy and how they make their money and all this other stuff. And sure, people could view it as a infringement on their like religious rights, but I personally disagree with that, in the fact that these are companies. These are like conglomerates of people working together to collect this money. Where's that money going? We need to be holding people accountable. And that's basically what this all stems from. I believe that corporate America needs to be held accountable on a number of levels, and thusly my advocacy for an active referee facilitated by our government. How that manifests itself, what legislation needs to be put in place, or what system needs to be created to manifest that, I'm not sure. But I'm sure there's educated people out there who know what direction to take or what steps to take in order to move that direction. Conversation starts here. Let me know your thoughts, comments, questions, and concerns in the doobly-doo or whatever the fuck. Yeah, I really do want to be challenged on a number of these things, but I hope those challenges come in the form of questions, number one, and number two, in the form of information, direction towards information. Rather than a person saying it themselves, I'd rather you point me to an article. I'm not saying you have to, but I'd prefer that, because I feel like it's easier for me to learn from people if they're just pointing me to another source of information rather than them telling it to me straight up and me having to take them at face value. Again, I have no credibility in any of these sections. I'm just trying to start the conversation and give my 2 cents on it, and I really hope that these ideas resonate with a number of people, or at least the summary of the government needs to be active in regulating the market. Can't compete with the companies. Nuh-uh. No competition whatsoever. There should be a total separation of the government between the economy. However, it needs to be involved in the fact that regulations are put into place and people are held accountable, as well as corporations are held accountable. I think that's the only way to move forward in terms of the economic status quo that we currently find ourselves in. Yeah, dude. I think I'm kind of rambling on now and repeating myself, so I'm going to cut it off here. My name's Paul Zachariah, and if I'm elected president, I'm going to make soup. Let's make soup, y'all.